Cowboy, every time I bend down, I catch you staring. Don't you dare deny it. The sun was high in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the small town. It was the kind of day that made everything feel alive. The kind of day where laughter floated in the air, mingling with the smell of hay, dust, and leather. Ella stood near the stables, her hands gripping the edge of a saddle as she adjusted it carefully on a horse named Daisy. She loved these moments, the quiet satisfaction of a job done right, the feel of the horse beneath her hands, and the faint rhythm of its breathing. She had grown up in this town, and rodeos were as much a part of her life as the air she breathed. She glanced around, making sure the other horses were safe. The stables were busy today. Families had come from nearby towns to watch the rodeo. Children ran across the dusty paths, chasing each other with excitement, and the smell of fried food drifted from a small vendor cart near the entrance. It was lively, full of sounds and colors, and yet in the midst of it, she felt a strange presence, as if someone was watching her. Ella's instincts were rarely wrong. Slowly her eyes lifted, scanning the crowd, and there he was, Jake, standing just beyond the stables, his hat tilted slightly down, his hands casually resting on the fence. And yet, she could feel his gaze. There was something about the way he looked at her that made her heart skip a beat. It wasn't just a glance. It was attentive, curious, and undeniably focused. Every time she bent down to tighten a strap or check the stirrups, she caught him staring. She couldn't help but notice the way his eyes followed her movements, careful but clearly fascinated. It made her cheeks heat up, a mix of irritation and something she didn't quite want to name. Ella was never one to be shy or timid. She had a reputation in town for being bold, outspoken, and quick-witted. So, instead of ignoring him, she decided to confront the situation, leaning a little closer to Daisy as if she were talking to the horse alone. "Cowboy, every time I bend down I catch you staring," she said, her voice teasing but sharp enough to get his attention. She could feel the warmth creeping up her neck as she waited for his reaction, half expecting him to turn away, embarrassed. But Jake didn't. He held her gaze, his lips twitching in a way that might have been a smile or a suppressed laugh. He didn't deny it, and that made Ella's heart race even faster. The moment hung there in the air, charged with a mixture of amusement and something else, something neither of them could quite name yet. The stables, the horses, the dust, they all seemed to fade into the background for just a few seconds. It was just the two of them, caught in a strange, unspoken game. Jake tipped his hat slightly and said nothing, letting the silence speak for him. Ella smirked, shaking her head and muttering, "Don't you dare deny it," as if daring him to respond. His eyes, dark and steady, seemed to promise that he wouldn't, and she found herself laughing despite the sudden nervous flutter in her chest. It wasn't the first time she had noticed him. Jake was a quiet man, not the kind to make a big show of himself, but there was a presence about him that drew attention without trying. He had the kind of calm confidence that made people notice him even if he didn't say a word. He worked with the horses every day, ensuring that they were fed, groomed, and ready for the rodeo. Most of the town saw him as dependable, steady, the kind of person who could handle anything thrown at him. But to Ella, he was suddenly more than just reliable. He was fascinating, intriguing, and impossible to ignore. She shook herself slightly, trying to focus on her work. The saddle straps had to be adjusted properly, and she prided herself on getting every detail right. Daisy shifted beneath her hands, her ears twitching, sensing Ella's attention and the energy around her. The sound of hooves and laughter echoed from the arena, blending with the creaking of the wooden fences and the soft whistle of the wind. Ella tried to concentrate, but Jake's gaze lingered in the corner of her mind. Every movement she made, every small action, seemed amplified under his quiet observation. It was both irritating and strangely thrilling, a sensation she hadn't expected. As she stood upright to give Daisy a gentle pat on the neck, she felt a light tap on her shoulder. She turned quickly, expecting one of the kids from the rodeo to have bumped into her, but it was Jake. "You're really good with them," he said, nodding toward the horses. His voice was low, calm, and steady, carrying a sincerity that made her pause. She raised an eyebrow, trying to hide the rush of warmth that spread across her chest. "Thanks," she replied casually. though her heart was thumping faster than she cared to admit. "I've been working with horses all my life." Jake nodded, seemingly satisfied with her answer, but she caught the way he studied her for a brief moment, his eyes lingering just a little longer than necessary. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was almost as if he were trying to understand her, to learn something about her in those quiet, unspoken moments. Ella couldn't help but wonder what he saw when he looked at her. Did he see the hard work, the confidence, the independence she carried with her every day? Or was it something else, something more personal, that he couldn't put into words? The day wore on, and the rodeo began to attract more people. The sound of cheering, the thundering hooves, and the laughter of children filled the air. Ella moved among the horses, helping riders with last-minute adjustments, and every time she bent down she felt the undeniable pull of Jake's gaze. It was almost playful, like a game they were both too shy to admit they were playing. She caught him once again, his eyes fixed on her, and this time she didn't look away. Instead, she smiled, letting him know that she had noticed, that she wasn't afraid to acknowledge it. There was a spark there, small but undeniable, a connection that neither of them had expected to feel in such a simple, ordinary moment. By the afternoon, Ella found herself thinking about him more than she wanted to admit. She remembered the way he had tipped his hat, the subtle way he had looked at her, and the quiet confidence he carried without even trying. It was confusing and exciting at the same time. She had always been independent, focused on her own life and ambitions, and yet here was someone who had managed to catch her attention without saying much at all. The irony of it wasn't lost on her. She was usually the one observing, noticing the details others missed, and now she was the one being watched, and somehow it felt thrilling. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the dusty town, Ella took a moment to step back and observe the scene. The horses were settled, the riders prepared, and the crowd was buzzing with anticipation. She took a deep breath, feeling the warm evening air fill her lungs, and allowed herself a small, private smile. She had noticed him staring. She had called him out on it, and he hadn't denied it. There was something about that simple fact that made the entire day feel different, charged with possibility and curiosity. It was the beginning of something she didn't fully understand yet, but she was eager to find out. And as she adjusted Daisy's saddle one last time before heading toward the arena, she caught his gaze once more. It wasn't just a glance. It was a look filled with attention, admiration, and perhaps something deeper that neither of them had the courage to name just yet. Ella felt a flutter of excitement, a mix of nerves and anticipation that made her heart beat a little faster. For the first time in a long while, she realized that something unexpected had entered her life, something that could change the way she saw her small town, her daily routines, and maybe even herself. The rodeo was just beginning, and yet, in that small corner of the stables, a story was quietly starting, a story that neither Ella nor Jake could have predicted, one glance at a time. The next morning the sun rose over the town with a soft, warm glow, painting the streets and stables in shades of gold. Ella was up early as usual, tying her boots and brushing her hair back into a practical braid. She had a busy day ahead, helping with the rodeo and making sure the horses were ready. The day promised laughter, movement, and a chance to see familiar faces, but she found herself thinking about Jake even before she had finished her breakfast. The thought made her smile, though she quickly scolded herself. She wasn't usually the type to let a boy, or anyone, distract her from her work. Yet Jake's quiet presence, and the way he looked at her yesterday, had left a mark. She shook her head, trying to focus, but the moment she reached the stables, her eyes immediately scanned the area. And there he was. Jake was already tending to the horses, his hands deftly moving over their coats, checking saddles, and humming softly under his breath. He didn't notice her at first, and that was almost a relief, giving her a chance to catch her own breath. Ella moved closer, pretending to adjust a bridle, but she couldn't stop herself from glancing in his direction. He seemed completely absorbed in his work, yet she knew he would eventually notice her. There was a calm determination about him, a quiet focus that contrasted with the chaos of the rodeo preparations around them. Kids ran past carrying balloons. The smell of fresh bread from the vendor's cart drifted through the air, and a horse snickered softly. It was ordinary, routine even. But now it felt charged, because she knew Jake was here. As she bent down to check Daisy's hoof, she felt the familiar prickle of attention. She looked up quickly, and sure enough, Jake's eyes were on her. This time she didn't make a comment immediately. Instead, she let herself watch him as he adjusted the saddle on another horse. His movements were careful, deliberate, yet there was a natural ease in everything he did. Ella found herself thinking about small things she hadn't noticed before. The way his hair fell under his hat, the quiet patience in his posture, the slight smile that tugged at the corners of his mouth whenever he thought no one was looking. Despite herself, she felt a little thrill every time their eyes met. She wasn't used to this playful tension that made even simple chores feel exciting. Normally, Ella was focused on efficiency, on getting things done, but now she found herself pausing, watching him, and wondering what he was thinking. It was frustrating, and yet it was delightful. Jake, on the other hand, was no less aware of her. He had been thinking about her since the moment he first saw her the day before. There was something about her confidence, the way she moved so naturally with the horses, the light in her eyes that made him pause every time she smiled. It drew him in. He wasn't the type to be forward, to make grand gestures, but he couldn't hide his fascination. Every glance, every subtle shift in his posture when she was near, betrayed how much he noticed her. As the morning wore on, small moments began to bring them together, almost by accident. Ella spilled a bucket of water near the stables, and Jake was there instantly, stepping forward to help her clean it up. "You okay?" he asked, his voice steady, calm, reassuring. Ella laughed, brushing her hands on her jeans. "I'm fine. Just a little clumsy this morning," she admitted. The exchange was simple, mundane even, but there was a spark in the air, a shared amusement that neither could ignore. Later, one of the horses got restless, kicking at the fence and nudging the gate with its head. Ella stepped in to calm it down, and Jake arrived almost at the same moment, offering a steadying hand. Their fingers brushed slightly as they adjusted the reins, and both of them felt the unexpected jolt of electricity that comes from proximity. Ella's cheeks warmed, and Jake's gaze lingered just a little longer than necessary. Neither spoke, but the unspoken connection was clear. As the day continued, the playful tension grew. Ella tried to focus on her tasks, but she couldn't stop noticing him. Each time she bent down to adjust a strap or help a horse, she felt the familiar weight of his eyes on her. At first, she wanted to ignore it, to pretend it didn't matter, but then she caught herself smiling at him, teasing him silently. She realized that part of her enjoyed it, the attention, the small game they were both playing without words. Jake, too, felt the growing pull of curiosity and admiration. He wasn't used to someone as confident and self-assured as Ella noticing him, or noticing him in return. He found himself thinking of ways to interact with her, small moments to connect without overstepping, gestures that would let her know he cared without making things awkward. Every time she laughed at a minor mistake, every time she helped a rider with care and patience, he found himself more drawn to her. By midday, the town had grown even busier. The rodeo arena filled with cheering families, the smell of fried pies and popcorn filled the air, and the laughter of children echoed across the dusty streets. Ella was helping a young girl adjust her helmet when she felt the shadow of Jake standing nearby. She glanced up and their eyes met. This time, she didn't look away. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, a small challenge in her eyes, as if daring him to acknowledge the connection. He responded with the faintest of smiles, a silent promise that he had noticed, that he understood the game they were playing. Small gestures and accidents continued to bring them closer throughout the day. A horse stepped unexpectedly near Ella, and Jake was there, guiding it gently back into place. Their hands met again briefly as they adjusted the reins, and both laughed softly, caught in the moment. Friends and family around them began to notice, offering teasing smiles and whispered comments, which only made the playful tension grow. Ella found herself laughing more than she had in weeks, enjoying the unexpected companionship and the thrill of being seen by someone who truly noticed her. As the afternoon heat began to soften into a gentle breeze, Ella and Jake found themselves sitting on the fence, taking a moment's rest. Horses moved calmly nearby, and the sounds of the rodeo seemed distant, softened by the warmth of the late afternoon sun. For a brief moment, it was just the two of them. Ella glanced at Jake, her curiosity and amusement evident. "You really like watching me, don't you?" she asked lightly, teasing but with a hint of seriousness. Jake chuckled softly, a low, warm sound that made her heart flutter. "Maybe," he admitted, his voice steady and honest. He didn't try to hide it. He didn't make excuses. For the first time, there was no hesitation, no playful denial. He simply acknowledged what had been obvious to both of them. Ella felt a rush of excitement mixed with relief. It was as if a weight had been lifted. Suddenly, their little game had a new honesty to it, a shared understanding that made the tension feel even more alive. They spent the next hour talking quietly, sharing small stories about their lives, the horses, and the town. Jake mentioned his responsibilities at the ranch, the long hours he spent caring for the animals, and how he rarely had time for anything else. Ella shared anecdotes from her own childhood, the challenges she had faced growing up in the town, and her love for working with horses. The conversation was easy, natural, and full of laughter. Both of them discovered small, unexpected similarities and found themselves enjoying each other's company more than either had anticipated. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long golden shadows across the dusty rodeo grounds, Ella realized how much she had enjoyed the day. She had come to the stables with a simple goal, to help with the horses and keep the rodeo running smoothly. But by the end of it, she had found something unexpected, a connection with someone who seemed to notice her, to appreciate her, and even to challenge her in subtle ways. She couldn't deny it any longer. Jake had captured her attention, and she found herself looking forward to the next moment they would share. Jake, too, walked away from the stables that evening with a sense of anticipation and excitement. He hadn't planned for this, hadn't expected to be so drawn to someone as lively, confident, and kind as Ella. Yet every glance, every small interaction throughout the day had made one thing clear. He wanted to know her better, to spend more time with her, and to see where this playful connection could lead. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of possibility, a future that seemed brighter, lighter, and full of laughter. As the last rays of sunlight faded and the rodeo grounds quieted for the evening, both of them walked away with smiles on their faces, hearts a little lighter, and thoughts full of the other. It had been a simple day, ordinary in many ways, yet extraordinary in the small, meaningful moments that brought them closer. The playful tension, the subtle glances, the shared laughter. It was all part of something that neither of them could fully explore. And so, the day ended, but the story between Ella and Jake was just beginning. Every glance, every shared moment, every laugh, and every small gesture had planted a seed of curiosity and affection. Neither of them could deny it, and neither would want to. The playful tension of the morning had grown into something more meaningful by evening, a quiet understanding, a spark of connection, and the promise of something beautiful yet to come. The next day dawned with a soft golden light, and the town was already stirring with the familiar hum of activity. Ella woke up feeling a strange mixture of excitement and nervousness. The previous day had been filled with subtle glances, small gestures, and playful tension between her and Jake. She hadn't realized just how much it had affected her until she found herself replaying every moment in her mind. The way he had looked at her, the faint smile that had tugged at his lips, the steady calm he carried, it had left a mark. She shook her head, trying to focus on her morning routine, but her thoughts inevitably drifted back to him. She wondered if he felt the same way, if he had been thinking about her as much as she had about him. The thought made her smile, but also a little nervous. She wasn't used to these feelings, and she wasn't sure how to handle them. She had always been independent, confident, and focused on her work. Yet Jake's quiet presence had a way of making her heart beat faster, and her thoughts scatter in ways she didn't expect. By the time she reached the stables, the morning sun had climbed higher, warming the dusty paths and the rows of horses waiting patiently. Jake was already there, brushing a horse's coat with meticulous care. His movements were calm and practiced, each motion precise, yet there was a certain softness in the way he handled the animal. Ella paused for a moment, watching him, her heart fluttering. She knew she had to speak to him directly this time. The playful glances and subtle tension had been fun, but she wanted honesty. She wanted to know where they truly stood. Taking a deep breath, she approached him. "Jake," she called softly, and he looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers immediately. There was a faint spark of recognition, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they had started to form. She stepped closer, placing her hands on the railing as she leaned slightly toward him. "We need to talk," she said, her voice teasing but firm. Jake's expression shifted slightly, curiosity and a hint of nervousness flickering across his face. He set the brush down carefully and turned his full attention to her. "Okay," he said simply, his voice steady but soft. There was no hesitation, no attempt to deflect. It was clear he was ready to listen, to be honest, and to face whatever she was about to say. Ella took another breath, her eyes searching his. "Don't you dare deny it," she said, a small smile tugging at her lips, though her heart was pounding. "Every time I bend down, I catch you staring. I see it. Don't try to hide it." Jake blinked for a moment, as if surprised by her directness, and then a small, genuine smile spread across his face. "You noticed," he said quietly. "I thought I was being subtle, but apparently I wasn't subtle enough." He chuckled softly, and the sound warmed her in a way she hadn't expected. Ella's smile widened, a mix of relief and amusement. She had been half expecting him to deny it, to play coy, to deflect, but he hadn't. He had admitted it, and that honesty made her feel a strange sense of closeness to him, as if a bridge had been built between them in a single, simple moment. They stood there for a few seconds, the morning sun casting a warm glow around them, the sounds of the stables and the distant rodeo fading into the background. There was a comfortable silence, one that spoke more than words ever could. Finally, Ella laughed softly, shaking her head. "I should have known," she said. "You can't hide anything, can you?" Jake laughed too, a low, rich sound that made her heart flutter. "Apparently not," he admitted. "I tried, I really did, but I couldn't stop noticing you. You're different, confident, kind, and interesting. I didn't expect to feel this way, but I do." Ella felt a rush of warmth at his words. She had always been proud of her independence, her ability to handle her own life. But here was someone noticing her not for her reputation or her work, but for her as a person. It was a new feeling, one that made her smile uncontrollably. "I'm glad you finally admitted it," she said softly, her eyes meeting his, "because I noticed you too." "And I was wondering if you felt the same way." Jake's expression softened, a mixture of relief and happiness evident on his face. "I did," he said simply. "From the first moment I saw you, I just wasn't sure how to approach you. I didn't want to make things awkward, and I didn't want to risk losing the little connection we had started." Ella nodded, understanding completely. She had been hesitant too, unsure of how to navigate this new, unexpected attraction. But now that the truth was out, the tension that had built up over the past days seemed to melt away, replaced by a sense of possibility, of hope, and of excitement. They spent the next hour talking quietly, leaning against the fence, sharing stories about their lives. Ella told him about her childhood, growing up in the town, her love for horses, and the small dreams she held for the future. Jake shared his own experiences, the responsibilities he carried with the ranch, the long hours, and the quiet moments he cherished when he could simply be himself. As they talked, they discovered more about each other than they had in all the subtle glances and playful moments of the past days. They found common ground in their love for animals, their appreciation for honesty, and their desire for meaningful connections. The conversation flowed naturally, filled with laughter, small teasing remarks, and moments of sincere reflection. It was a rare and beautiful kind of connection, one that felt effortless yet significant. At one point, a young boy ran past chasing a balloon that had slipped from his hands. The balloon bounced along the dusty ground, and Ella instinctively reached to grab it. Jake was faster, stepping forward to catch it just before it could drift away. Their hands met briefly, and both of them laughed at the small, serendipitous moment. It was ordinary, yet it felt charged with meaning, a small reminder of how connected they were beginning to feel. By midday, the stables were bustling with activity as the rodeo preparations continued. Horses were being saddled, riders were checking their gear, and townspeople moved about preparing for the afternoon events. Despite the busyness, Ella and Jake found themselves drawn to each other, seeking out small moments to talk, to laugh, and to simply enjoy the presence of the other. Every glance, every shared smile, every accidental touch seemed to deepen their connection. Ella found herself thinking about Jake more than she had expected. She realized that the playful tension, the teasing, and the stolen glances had grown into something deeper, something she couldn't ignore. She admired his quiet confidence, his steady nature, and the way he genuinely cared for the horses. He wasn't boastful or flashy. He was dependable, thoughtful, and sincere, a rare combination that made her heart flutter. Jake, in turn, was equally captivated by Ella. He had always respected her independence, her intelligence, and her confidence, but now he found himself drawn to her in ways that went beyond admiration. He wanted to spend more time with her, to understand her better, and to share moments of laughter, conversation, and quiet reflection. He realized that the feelings he had tried to suppress were real, strong, and undeniable. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, they found themselves sitting on a fence, watching the activity around them. Horses moved gracefully in the arena. Children laughed and ran past, and the smell of fresh food wafted from the vendors. For a moment it felt as if the world had slowed down, leaving just the two of them in a quiet, intimate bubble. Ella turned to Jake, her eyes bright with curiosity and amusement. "So, now that we've admitted it, what happens next?" she asked softly, a teasing lilt in her voice. Jake looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "I suppose we see where this goes," he said finally. "We take it one step at a time. I don't want to rush anything, but I also don't want to ignore what's here, what's between us." Ella smiled, feeling a sense of relief and excitement wash over her.
"I like that," she said. "One step at a time."
"But I think we both know that we're already off to a pretty good start." They laughed softly, the sound blending with the hum of the stables and the distant cheers from the rodeo arena. In that moment, everything felt simple, honest, and full of possibility. The playful tension that had defined their first encounters had transformed into something deeper: mutual understanding, genuine interest, and the beginnings of trust. As the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows and a warm golden glow across the town, Ella and Jake stood side by side, leaning against the fence. There was a quiet, comfortable silence between them, one that spoke volumes without a single word. They didn't need to rush, didn't need to force anything. What mattered was that they had found each other, that they had acknowledged the spark that had been building, and that they were willing to explore it together. And so, as the day drew to a close, both of them walked away from the stables with hearts lighter than they had been in days. The playful teasing, the subtle glances, the shared laughter, they had all led to this moment of honesty and understanding. It was a beginning, a new chapter, and both Ella and Jake felt the quiet thrill of something beautiful taking root, ready to grow in its own time. The next evening arrived quietly, with the soft colors of sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Ella had finished her work at the stables and decided to take a walk around the outskirts of the town, needing a little space to think after the morning's events. The air was fresh and cool, carrying the faint smell of hay and the distant sounds of the rodeo winding down. She had been thinking about Jake all day, about how honest he had been, how calm and genuine his presence felt, and how much she enjoyed being around him. As she walked, she almost didn't notice Jake approaching from behind. He had been checking on a few of the horses and had spotted her from a distance. Without a word, he fell into step beside her. For a moment they walked in comfortable silence, listening to the soft crunch of the dirt under their boots and the gentle whistle of the wind through the trees. There was something comforting about being near him, something that made her shoulders relax and her mind quiet. Finally, she glanced at him. "I didn't expect you to follow me," she said, a teasing smile on her lips. Jake chuckled softly. I didn't exactly follow, he said. I just wanted to make sure you weren't wandering too far alone. His voice was calm, steady, and full of sincerity. Ella felt warmth spread through her chest. He wasn't trying to impress her with big gestures or dramatic words. He was simply being thoughtful, attentive, and real. They walked on, talking quietly about small, ordinary things, the condition of the horses, the events of the rodeo, and the plans for the next day. But beneath the surface of the conversation there was a subtle, unspoken connection. Each glance, each pause, each laugh carried a weight of meaning that neither of them needed to put into words. Ella found herself noticing details she hadn't before: the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the quiet confidence in his posture, and the easy patience he carried even in casual conversation. As they reached a small hill overlooking the town, Jake paused and gestured for her to look. The view was breathtaking. The town stretched out below them, rooftops glowing in the fading sunlight, and the open fields beyond shimmered under the golden light. The moment felt magical, serene, and yet filled with a quiet intensity. Ella felt a rush of emotions, peace, excitement, and something new that she couldn't quite name. "It's beautiful," she said softly, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sunset. Jake nodded, glancing at her with a warmth that made her heart skip a beat. "Not as beautiful as this moment," he said quietly. His words were simple, honest, and sincere, and they made Ella's cheeks flush. She laughed softly, trying to hide her sudden shyness, but the smile on her face was unmistakable. They found a fallen log to sit on, and for a while, they simply enjoyed the quiet together. Neither felt the need to fill the space with words. The air was calm, the sky painted with streaks of pink and orange, and the world seemed to pause around them. Ella felt a sense of connection with Jake that she had never experienced before. It wasn't just attraction. It was a feeling of understanding, of comfort, and of trust beginning to take root. After a while, Jake spoke again, his voice soft but steady.
"Ella, I've been thinking," he said, "about us."
"About this." He gestured vaguely between them, indicating the connection that had been building over the past few days.
I know we're just getting to know each other, but I want to be honest. I like you.
"I've liked you since the first day I saw you at the stables, and I don't want to hide it anymore." Ella felt her heart flutter at his words. She had hoped he felt the same, but hearing it aloud made it real, in a way that filled her with warmth and excitement. "Jake, I like you too," she admitted, her voice soft but firm. "I wasn't sure if you felt the same, but I've been hoping you did." There was a moment of silence, filled only by the sounds of the wind and the distant calls of animals settling down for the evening. Then, without another word, they both smiled, a shared understanding passing between them. It was a simple acknowledgement, yet it carried the weight of their growing feelings, the excitement of discovery, and the joy of mutual honesty. They spent the next hour talking quietly about their dreams, their fears, and the little things that mattered to them. Jake told Ella about his hopes for the ranch, his dedication to caring for the animals, and the pride he felt in being part of the small-town community. Ella shared her own aspirations, the small goals she had set for herself, and her love for the rodeo and the horses. Each revelation deepened their connection, showing them that they had more in common than they had realized. As the sun dipped lower and the sky turned a deep shade of orange, Jake reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from Ella's face. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned slightly into the touch, a quiet acknowledgement of trust and affection. It was a small gesture, yet it carried a weight of emotion, a promise of care and understanding. They watched the sun disappear behind the horizon together, sharing quiet laughter at small observations, teasing each other gently, and enjoying the simplicity of the moment. Ella realized that she had never felt so comfortable with someone so quickly. Jake's calm presence, his quiet attentiveness, his genuine nature, made her feel safe, appreciated, and understood. As darkness fell and the first stars began to appear in the sky, they decided to start walking back toward the town. The air had cooled, and the gentle breeze rustled through the trees, carrying with it the faint sounds of the evening. They walked side by side, occasionally brushing shoulders, laughing softly and sharing small personal thoughts. The playful tension that had marked their earlier interactions had transformed into something deeper: trust, affection, and the beginnings of a real bond. Ella felt a thrill of anticipation as they approached the stables. She knew that their connection was growing stronger, that the playful teasing and subtle glances of the past days were now giving way to genuine emotional intimacy. She was excited, curious, and more than a little nervous about what the future might hold. Jake seemed equally aware of the shift. He walked with a quiet confidence, his gaze occasionally meeting hers, and a small, satisfied smile tugging at his lips. He felt a sense of contentment he hadn't known in a long time. Being with Ella, talking to her, laughing with her, and simply sharing the space around her had become the highlight of his days. He didn't need to rush anything. He simply wanted to enjoy the moment and see where this connection might lead. Back at the stables, they paused briefly to check on the horses before parting ways for the evening. Jake held the reins for Ella as she led Daisy to her stall, and their hands brushed once more. Neither pulled away immediately, both savoring the fleeting contact, the warmth it brought, and the silent promise it carried. Finally, they stepped back, giving each other a small, meaningful smile. "Good night, Ella," Jake said softly, his voice carrying the sincerity of his feelings. "Good night, Jake," she replied, her heart full and her smile bright. There was a sense of anticipation, excitement, and hope in her voice, a reflection of the bond that had grown between them over the past days. As she watched him walk away, Ella felt a quiet thrill in her chest. The playful glances, teasing comments, and subtle gestures of the past days had blossomed into something more meaningful. She was beginning to understand that this connection, this bond with Jake, was special. It wasn't just attraction. It was trust, understanding, and the exciting possibility of a future shared together. Jake, walking back toward his own home, felt a similar rush of emotion. He had admired Ella for days, but now that they had spoken openly, shared their feelings, and spent this quiet evening together, he realized just how much he cared for her. He looked forward to the next day, the next moment, and the chance to continue building something meaningful with her. The night settled over the small town, the stars twinkling above like silent witnesses to the beginning of a story neither of them could have predicted. Ella and Jake, two people brought together by chance, curiosity, and the small moments of everyday life, were now bound by something deeper, a connection that promised growth, understanding, and shared happiness. And so, as the world around them grew quiet, both of them carried with them the warmth of the evening, the soft glow of the sunset, and the quiet knowledge that something beautiful had begun. It was a moment of intimacy without words, of trust without expectations, and of a bond that neither wanted to rush but both were eager to nurture. The next morning dawned bright and clear, with sunlight streaming across the town and warming the stables. Ella woke up feeling lighter than she had in weeks, her thoughts filled with Jake and the evening they had shared. There was a quiet excitement in her chest, a feeling that things were changing in a way she hadn't expected, yet welcomed wholeheartedly. She smiled to herself as she braided her hair, thinking about the soft honesty in Jake's words, the easy laughter they had shared, and the small moments that had slowly brought them closer. By the time she arrived at the stables, the air was already buzzing with activity. Riders were checking their gear, horses neighed softly, and townsfolk moved about preparing for the rodeo's afternoon events. Ella's eyes instinctively scanned the area, and she spotted Jake almost immediately. He was near the fence, brushing one of the horses with careful, steady strokes, his posture calm and confident as always. He looked up just as she approached, and their eyes met. The small smile that passed between them was like a secret code, a shared understanding of the bond that had grown between them. "Good morning," she said, her voice bright and cheerful. "Good morning," he replied, tipping his hat slightly. "Ready for another busy day?" Ella nodded. "Always." She laughed softly. "But I think I might enjoy today a little more than usual." Her gaze lingered on him, and she saw the warmth in his eyes. The morning passed with the usual rhythm of chores and preparation. Yet there was a subtle difference. Ella and Jake moved through the tasks with an unspoken connection, their glances and smiles carrying messages that no words were needed for. When she bent down to adjust a saddle or help a horse, Jake's eyes found her naturally, And this time, she didn't shy away. She let him notice, letting the playful tension continue in a more comfortable, intimate way. The awareness of each other's presence no longer caused nervousness. It was a gentle thrill, a quiet happiness that lingered through every moment of the morning. At one point, a rider's hat flew off in the wind, rolling toward the center of the arena. Ella bent down to grab it, but Jake was there instantly, his hand brushing hers as he picked it up first. Both of them laughed at the coincidence, their laughter mingling with the sound of hooves and cheering in the background. The moment was small, ordinary even, yet it carried the charm of shared experience, of being attuned to each other without needing to plan it. After the morning tasks were done, the two of them found a quiet corner near the edge of the stables. Horses moved calmly nearby, and the air was filled with the faint scent of hay and dust. For a moment, the world felt still, the usual bustle fading into a soft background. Ella leaned against the fence, glancing at Jake, her expression a mix of amusement and curiosity. "So," she began teasingly, "now that we're officially, whatever this is, are we going to actually spend time together outside of the stables, or do we just keep chasing each other around horses?" Jake laughed softly, a warm, rich sound that made her heart skip a beat. "I was hoping we could do both," he said, his eyes glinting with humor. "But if we want to spend time outside the stables, I think I know a place." Intrigued, Ella raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really? And where would that be?" Jake smiled. "There's a trail on the edge of town. It's quiet, beautiful, and perfect for a ride."
I thought maybe we could go there later. Just the two of us.
Ella felt a rush of excitement. She had spent so much time around horses in the rodeo that she rarely took moments for herself. Yet the idea of spending time with Jake, sharing something peaceful and private, felt wonderful. "I'd like that," she said, her smile brightening. "I think it would be perfect." The afternoon passed quickly, filled with the usual rodeo excitement, cheering crowds and small moments of connection. Ella and Jake worked together naturally, helping riders, adjusting gear, and laughing when small accidents or misunderstandings occurred. The townsfolk had begun to notice their closeness, offering teasing smiles and whispered comments, but neither of them paid much attention. Their focus was on each other, on the shared moments and quiet understanding that had begun to define their days. Finally, the rodeo activities wound down, and the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon. Jake approached Ella, holding two saddles. "Ready for our ride?" he asked, his voice calm and inviting. Ella nodded, feeling a sense of anticipation she hadn't expected.
Absolutely. They mounted their horses and set off along the trail, the soft clatter of hooves against the dirt blending with the distant sounds of the town.
The trail was lined with trees that filtered the golden sunlight, creating patterns of light and shadow on the ground. The air was fresh and cool, carrying the faint scent of pine and earth. For Ella, it felt like stepping into another world, one removed from the routines, responsibilities, and noise of the town. Jake rode beside her, matching her pace, and they shared easy conversation as they rode. They talked about the horses, the day's events, and the small plans they had for the coming days. Each word, each glance, each laugh strengthened their connection. There was no rush, no pressure, just the quiet joy of being together, sharing a simple moment that felt entirely their own. As they reached the top of a small hill, they paused to take in the view. Below them, the town stretched out in the fading sunlight, and the fields beyond shimmered under the golden glow. Ella and Jake sat quietly for a moment, letting the beauty of the scene wash over them. Ella leaned slightly toward Jake, and he instinctively mirrored her, their shoulders brushing. The contact was gentle, unspoken, and yet it carried an unmistakable warmth. Jake broke the silence. "Ella, I'm really glad we're doing this. Spending time together like this, it feels right." Ella nodded, her heart swelling.
I feel the same way, Jake. It's
Peaceful, and it's perfect. I've never had a day like this before, just being with someone who understands. They stayed there for a while, watching the sun dip lower, the sky turning shades of pink and purple. The world felt quiet, suspended, as if it had paused to let them enjoy this moment. Ella felt a deep sense of contentment, a rare feeling that came from knowing she was exactly where she was meant to be. Jake's presence was comforting, grounding, and exciting all at once. As darkness began to settle, they started back along the trail. The air had cooled, and the first stars began to appear in the sky. They rode slowly, enjoying the quiet, the soft sounds of the night, and the gentle rhythm of their horses. Occasionally their hands brushed, and each time there was a thrill of electricity, a reminder of the connection that had grown between them over the past days. Back at the stables they dismounted and led their horses back to their stalls. The quiet night was filled with the soft sounds of horses moving and the gentle rustle of the trees. Ella turned to Jake, a small smile on her lips. "Thank you," she said softly. "For today, for everything." Jake smiled back, a warmth in his eyes that made her heart flutter. "No, thank you," he replied, "for being you, for letting me be a part of this, of your world." They stood there for a moment, simply enjoying each other's presence. There was no rush to speak, no pressure to act. The trust, understanding, and affection between them had grown into something solid, quiet, and real. Ella realized that this was the kind of connection she had always hoped for. Someone who appreciated her for who she was, who shared her values, and who brought joy into her everyday life. Finally, they parted for the evening, giving each other a small, meaningful smile. "Good night, Ella," Jake said, his voice soft but sincere. "Good night, Jake," she replied, feeling a quiet happiness settle in her chest. She watched him walk away, feeling a thrill of anticipation for the next day, the next moment, the next shared experience. The connection they had nurtured over these days had grown to something beautiful, something worth cherishing and exploring. As she walked to her home, Ella thought about how much had changed in such a short time. The playful teasing, the stolen glances, the quiet honesty, they had all led to this moment of understanding and closeness. She realized that she had never felt this way before, and that the future, whatever it held, felt brighter and more promising because of Jake. Jake, too, felt the warmth of contentment as he walked home under the starlit sky. The days of subtle glances and playful tension had transformed into something real, meaningful, and full of promise. He looked forward to each day with Ella, to the shared moments, the laughter, and the quiet understanding that had begun to define their bond. He knew that this was just the beginning, but it was a beginning he was eager to embrace. Over the next few days, their relationship continued to grow naturally. They spent more time together helping with the horses, enjoying quiet rides and sharing small conversations. Friends and family began to notice, offering smiles and teasing remarks. But Ella and Jake focused on each other, letting their connection strengthen with patience, trust, and joy. By the end of the week, it was clear to everyone that something special had blossomed between them. The playful glances, the gentle teasing, and the quiet honesty had developed into a genuine bond, one filled with laughter, understanding, and shared happiness. Ella and Jake had found in each other not just companionship, but a true connection that promised growth, joy, and the quiet beauty of everyday life shared together. And so, as the sun set over the town once more, casting a warm golden glow over the stables and fields, Ella and Jake stood together, hands brushing, hearts full, and eyes shining with the quiet excitement of something new and wonderful. The story that had begun with a glance, a playful remark, and a subtle tension had grown into a meaningful relationship, a bond that promised laughter, trust, and countless shared moments in the days to come. The world around them was quiet, peaceful, and beautiful, and for Ella and Jake, it felt like the perfect place to begin the next chapter of their lives, together.